Commander Jack Thompson stood at the viewport of the mining vessel Star Digger, his weathered face reflecting off the reinforced glass as he watched his crew work on the asteroid's surface. 20 years of deep space mining had taught him to trust his gut. And right now, his gut was screaming that something was wrong. The mysterious signal they'd picked up 3 hours ago had grown stronger, and the usual background chatter from Earth had gone silent. "Commander, you need to see this." Tom, his communications officer, called out from his station. The young man's face had gone pale as he pointed to his screen. "Multiple objects just appeared at the edge of our scanner range. They're big, sir. Really big." Jack rushed to the console, his boots clicking against the metal floor. The objects were massive, each one larger than the biggest Earth battleship ever built. Their smooth silver surfaces reflected the distant sunlight as they moved with impossible grace for their size. "Get everyone inside. Now." The words had barely left his mouth when the first transmission came through. The message was clear and cold. "Primitive species detected. This sector is now under Apex control. Submit to evaluation and classification." Jack's first instinct was to run, but his crew of 30 was still scattered across 3 mining sites. As he watched the alien ships approach, he made the only choice he could. He opened a channel. "This is Commander Jack Thompson of the Earth mining vessel Star Digger. We are a peaceful operation conducting resource extraction under Earth Federation guidelines. Please state your intentions." The response came immediately, but this time as a hologram that filled the bridge. The alien that appeared was tall and sleek, its metallic skin shimmering with patterns of light. "We are the Apex, shepherds of primitive species and guardians of proper technological advancement. Your mining methods are crude and inefficient. Your weapons are primitive. Your ships are basic. You require guidance." Jack felt his anger rise but kept his voice steady. "With all due respect, we don't need shepherds. We've managed quite well on our own." The Apex's patterns flickered in what might have been amusement. "Your species uses combustion engines and chemical rockets. You dig holes with mechanical devices when energy extraction is clearly superior. Your development must be corrected." As the alien spoke, Jack noticed something on one of the side screens. The Apex ships were powering up something, energy readings unlike anything he'd ever seen. He quickly hit the emergency recall signal for his crew. "We appreciate your offer," Jack said, trying to buy time, "but we'd prefer to develop at our own pace. Preference is irrelevant. Primitive species cannot be allowed to waste resources or develop improper technologies. You will submit to classification and integration into the Apex hierarchy. Resistance will result in immediate disciplinary action." The last of the mining pods was just docking when the Apex ship fired its first shot. The beam of energy missed the Star Digger by meters, a warning shot that turned a nearby asteroid into superheated gas. "You have 6 hours to prepare your species for evaluation," the Apex declared. "We have already begun our approach to your homeworld. Primitive species that resist classification are deemed hazardous and are removed. Choose wisely." The hologram vanished, leaving Jack and his crew in stunned silence. Through the viewport, he could see the massive ships taking up position around them, their weapons clearly visible. "Tom, the moment we're clear to transmit, send everything we've got to Earth. Every scan, every reading, every word they said." Jack's mind was already racing, analyzing the mining equipment around them in a new light. "And get me the engineering deck. If these aliens think our technology is primitive, let's show them why that's their first mistake." The Star Digger's engines hummed to life as Jack plotted an escape route through the asteroid field. They had 6 hours to prepare Earth for what was coming. 6 hours to turn their primitive mining equipment into something that could fight back. Looking at his crew's determined faces, Jack knew that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their technology. It was in their ability to adapt, to take the ordinary and make it extraordinary. The Apex had no idea what they'd just started. 3 days after first contact, Earth's greatest warships lay in ruins around Mars' orbit. Captain Emma Reed watched from the observation deck of Mining Station Delta as another human vessel burst into flames, its weapons useless against the Apex shields. The station, hidden in a crater and powered down to avoid detection, had become humanity's last hope in the solar system. "Captain, you need to see this," called Bill from his workstation. The old mining engineer had been studying the sensor readings from the battles nonstop. "Look at what happens to their shields when our mining lasers hit them." Emma rushed over, her boots making hollow sounds on the metal grating. The recording showed a mining vessel, likely trying to escape, firing its industrial cutting laser at an Apex ship. For a fraction of a second, the alien shield rippled differently than it did under military weapons. "Play it again," she ordered, leaning closer. "Slow it down to quarter speed." This time she saw it clearly. The mining laser, designed to cut through dense asteroid material, made the shield fluctuate in a distinct pattern. It didn't breach it, but the reaction was different from anything their military weapons had achieved. "They're shields," she muttered. "They're tuned to stop military-grade weapons. They never bothered to defend against industrial equipment because they think it's primitive." The realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. The Apex, in their arrogance, had prepared for warfare, but not for human creativity. She grabbed the station's intercom. "Everyone to the main cargo bay. Now." 20 minutes later, Emma stood before 60 survivors, miners, engineers, and the crews of 3 destroyed warships. Behind her, the cargo bay was filled with mining equipment, industrial tools, and maintenance machinery. "They think we're primitive," she said, her voice echoing in the large space. "They expect us to fight with warships and missiles. So we won't. We're going to fight with the tools they despise." She pointed to the industrial equipment around them. Mining lasers that can cut through solid rock. Magnetic cranes that can tear apart metal. Plasma welders hot enough to melt tungsten. Chemical sprays that can dissolve nearly anything. These aren't weapons to them. And that's exactly why they'll work. The crowd started to murmur as understanding spread. Tom, a former warship gunner, raised his hand. "The mining lasers operate on different frequencies than our military ones, if we modify them." "Exactly," Emma cut in. Bill already spotted their shields acting strange when hit with industrial lasers. "We modify our mining equipment, use it in ways it was never meant to be used. They won't expect it because they don't respect it." The next 12 hours were a fury of activity. Mining lasers were removed from their safety housings and rewired for maximum power. Industrial lubricants were mixed with corrosive cleaning agents to create shield-eating compounds. Magnetic cranes were modified to project focused fields that could potentially disrupt Apex systems. As Emma walked through the cargo bay, now turned makeshift weapon factory, she saw hope returning to people's faces. A group of engineers had turned a mineral separator into what they claimed was a projectile accelerator. 2 miners were modifying their drill's plasma cutter into something that might pierce alien armor. "Captain," called Bill from across the bay. "We just picked up 3 Apex ships heading this way. They're searching the crater field. We've got maybe 2 hours." Emma looked at their collection of modified industrial equipment, ugly, improvised, and definitely not military grade. But they were tools the Apex would never expect to face in combat. A smile crossed her face as she thought about the aliens' arrogance in dismissing human technology as primitive. "Perfect," she said. "Let's show them why underestimating human ingenuity is the last mistake they'll ever make. Power up the mineral separators and get those modified lasers into position. If they want to find us, we'll give them a welcome they'll never forget." The station hummed to life as they prepared for battle. Their weapons weren't pretty, weren't designed for war, and definitely weren't advanced by Apex standards. But they were about to prove that humans could turn anything into a weapon, especially when backed into a corner. The first Apex ship appeared over the crater's rim exactly as Bill had predicted. Its silver hull gleamed in the weak Martian sunlight, making it look more like an art piece than a warship. Emma watched from the control room as two more ships joined it, their sensors sweeping the area. "Power readings are minimal," Bill whispered, though the aliens couldn't possibly hear them. "They think we're just another dead station." Emma nodded, watching the main screen where red dots showed their modified equipment placed around the crater. Mining lasers hidden under rock piles, mineral separators disguised as broken machinery, chemical sprayers concealed in abandoned vehicles. "Remember," she said into her headset, "wait for my signal. Let them get close enough to trap all three ships." The apex ships moved with perfect formation, their arrogance clear in how they made no attempt to hide their approach. A transmission burst through their communication system. "Primitive mining facility detected. Commencing resource evaluation and salvage operation." Emma smiled. They still didn't consider the station a threat. "Positions check," she ordered quietly. "Team 1, ready. The modified mining lasers. Team 2, in position. The chemical sprayers. Team 3, standing by. The magnetic disruptors. Team 4, prepared. The mineral separator turned mass driver." The lead apex ship hovered directly over their main facility, probably preparing to land. Its shields shimmered faintly, a beautiful but deadly barrier that had destroyed Earth's finest warships. "Now," Emma shouted. The crater exploded into action. 6 mining lasers, stripped of their safety regulators and pushed far beyond normal power levels, fired simultaneously. Each beam hit the apex shield at a different frequency, creating a chaotic pattern of energy disruption. The shield flickered, trying to adapt to the unexpected attack. "Chemical teams, go." Modified maintenance vehicles burst from their hiding spots, spraying streams of mixed industrial chemicals. The compounds, originally designed to dissolve mineral deposits, splashed against the destabilized shields. Where military-grade weapons had failed, simple cleaning chemicals began eating through the alien defenses. The apex ships reacted quickly, charging their weapons. But they were caught off guard when Team 3 activated their magnetic disruptors. Mining cranes modified to project-focused magnetic fields. The alien ships' energy weapons sputtered and misfired as their precise systems were thrown into chaos by crude but powerful magnetic interference. "They're trying to retreat," Bill called out. "Mass driver ready." Emma watched as the apex ships struggled against the magnetic fields, their shields weakening under the continuous assault of mining lasers and corrosive sprays. "Wait for it. Wait. Fire." The mineral separator, transformed into a massive railgun, launched its first shot. A simple iron ore pellet, superheated and accelerated to incredible speed, shot through the weakened shield of the lid ship. The impact wasn't large, but it proved shields designed to stop energy weapons and explosives couldn't handle simple kinetic force. "Again," Emma ordered. "All teams, maximum power." The battle turned into chaos. The apex ships, their perfect formation broken, tried to fight back with advanced weapons that kept misfiring under magnetic interference. More mining lasers joined the attack, their crude but powerful beams creating gaps in the shields that chemical sprays quickly exploited. A second mass driver shot hit an engine, sending one apex ship spinning. The third shot breached a hull. Within minutes, the mighty alien vessels were retreating, their perfect silver surfaces scared and burned by mining equipment they had dismissed as primitive. As the dust settled, cheers erupted throughout the station. Emma stared at the sensor readings, barely believing what they had achieved. Humanity's first victory against the apex had been won not with advanced weapons, but with modified mining tools. "Send word to every surviving human outpost," she ordered. "Tell them exactly how we did this. The apex think they can only be hurt by advanced weapons. Let's show them how dangerous primitive technology can be in human hands." Looking at the celebration around her, Emma knew this was just the beginning. The apex had taught humanity an important lesson. Sometimes the simplest tools, used creatively, were the deadliest weapons of all. Lieutenant Tom Miller watched the massive Apex warship through his binoculars from the hidden observation post on Europa. The ice moon's surface glittered under Jupiter's light, making it hard to stay hidden. But that same ice had given him an idea so crazy it might actually work. "Are you sure about this?" asked Pete, his chief engineer. "We're betting everything on untested modifications to ice mining equipment." Tom lowered his binoculars and turned to the nervous engineer. "The mining station on Mars proved it works. We just need to think bigger." He pointed to the massive ice tunneling machines behind them, now modified far beyond their original purpose. "The Apex still think we're primitive. Let's use that." The past week had seen their small ice mining facility transformed. Standard ice drills had been converted into super-cooled projectile launchers. Thermal regulation systems were now weapon cooling units. Even the station's waste heat management became part of their trap. Signal from perimeter sensors called Mary from her monitoring station. 3 more Apex ships just entered Europa's orbit. They're heading for the main ice fields. Tom nodded. The bait was working. Their fake transmission about discovering rare minerals in Europa's ice had drawn exactly the response they'd hoped for. The Apex, still confident in their superiority, were sending a mining fleet to claim the non-existent resources. "All teams to positions," he ordered through the comm system. "Remember, wait for them to land. We only get one shot at this." The next hour was tense as they watched the Apex ships descend. Their silver hulls stood out starkly against Europa's white surface as they landed near the main mining facility. Just as intelligence had predicted, they didn't even bother with defensive formations. Why should they? It was just another primitive human mining post. The first Apex troops emerged from their ships, their advanced environment suits gleaming. They moved with mechanical precision toward the facility's main entrance, completely ignoring the seemingly broken mining equipment scattered around. "Now," Tom shouted. The trap was sprung. Modified ice drills burst to life, not drilling but shooting supercooled ice projectiles at incredible speeds. The Apex shields, designed to stop energy weapons and explosives, struggled against simple frozen water moving at bullet speed. But that was just the beginning. The station's thermal systems, reversed and amplified, began rapidly heating and cooling the area around the Apex ships. The sudden temperature changes created stress in their hull materials, something their shields weren't designed to prevent. "Second phase," Tom ordered. Deep beneath the ice, the biggest modification kicked in. They had spent days using mining equipment to create a precise network of tunnels under the landing zone. Now those tunnels were filled with superheated steam from the station's waste heat systems. The effect was devastating. The steam, under enormous pressure, found every crack their ice projectiles and thermal stress had created. Apex shields could stop weapons, but they couldn't stop physics. Steam found its way into vital systems, freezing and expanding in the cold of space, then melting again from waste heat. Within minutes, the mighty Apex ships were crippled. Their perfect hulls were cracked, their systems failing, and their shields useless against the simple combination of ice, steam, and temperature manipulation. "They're retreating," Mary called out as the damaged ships struggled to lift off. "2 of them can barely fly." Tom watched through his binoculars as the Apex fleet limped away from Europa. They had just won their second victory against the galaxy's most advanced civilization, using nothing but modified ice mining equipment and basic physics. "Send the data to every human outpost," he ordered. "The Apex aren't invincible. They're just not creative enough to see how dangerous simple things can be." As his team celebrated around him, Tom started planning their next modification. The Apex had taught humanity an important lesson. There was no such thing as primitive technology, only primitive thinking. In the Apex command ship orbiting Saturn, High Commander Ultrix watched the battle recordings for the 100th time. The mighty Apex vessels being defeated by ice and steam. The primitive mining lasers breaching their shields. The simple chemical sprays eating through their hulls. Each loss was an impossibility, yet they kept happening. Meanwhile, on Earth's moon, Commander Jack Thompson stood in the underground bunker that had once been a helium-3 mining facility. Around him, humans worked frantically to convert more everyday equipment into weapons. The recent victories had given everyone new ideas. "Sir," called a young engineer named Mike, "you need to see what we did with the atmospheric processors." Jack followed him to a testing chamber. Inside, a standard atmospheric processor from a mining dome had been modified. The machine, designed to make air breathable, now did something very different. "Watch this," Mike said, activating the device. A bubble of altered air formed in the chamber. When they dropped a piece of Apex armor into it, taken from a crashed ship, the metal began to corrode almost instantly. "It separates oxygen molecules and concentrates them," Mike explained. "Creates a super-oxidizing field. Their armor may be advanced, but it still follows the rules of chemistry." Before Jack could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Multiple Apex ships detected, called the warning system. Massive fleet approaching. Jack rushed to the command center. The main screen showed at least 30 Apex ships heading toward the moon. But these ships were different. They moved more cautiously, their formations designed to protect against attacks from every angle. "They're learning," Jack muttered. "They finally understand we're a real threat." The Apex proved this by broadcasting on all frequencies. "Attention, human resistance. Your creative use of primitive tools has been noted. You will now face the full might of an Apex war fleet. Surrender immediately." Jack smiled. "They still don't get it. All stations, prepare for battle. Show them what else we've turned into weapons." The battle that followed would be remembered as the turning point of the war. When the Apex ships approached, expecting modified mining tools, they instead faced an entire moon's worth of repurposed equipment. Weather control systems, originally designed to protect mining operations from solar radiation, now focused that same radiation into deadly beams. Magnetic ore separators became shield disruptors on a massive scale. Industrial freezing units, meant for preserving samples, now flash froze entire sections of Apex ships. But the real surprise came from the moon's mass driver network. Originally built to launch mining containers into space, the humans had spent weeks modifying the entire system. When activated, it turned the moon's surface into one giant weapon, launching precisely targeted payloads of simple rock at devastating speeds. The Apex fleet, for all its advanced technology, found itself fighting against the most basic forces of nature, turned deadly by human creativity. Their shields could stop energy weapons but not kinetic impacts. Their armor could resist explosions, but not extreme temperature changes. Their sensors could detect any known weapon, but were blind to repurposed industrial tools. As the battle raged, Jack received reports from across the solar system. Every human outpost was fighting back, each using their own modified equipment in unique ways. Agricultural domes became poison gas factories. Communications arrays turned into sonic weapons. Even simple water purification systems were now generating superheated plasma. The Apex fleet, expecting to crush primitive resistance, instead found itself facing an enemy that could turn anything, literally anything, into a weapon. "Send word to all outposts," Jack ordered as he watched another Apex ship fall to what had once been mining equipment. "The tide is turning. They thought we were primitive, but they're learning what humans do best. We adapt, we improvise, and we overcome." In the Apex command ship, High Commander Ultrix finally understood their critical mistake. They had dismissed humans as primitive because of their simple technology. Now they were learning that true advancement wasn't in the tools you had, but in how creatively you used them. Captain Emma Reed stood in what had once been a greenhouse on Mars, looking at rows of plants that now served a very different purpose. The vegetables and fruits had been carefully selected and modified not for food, but for their natural toxins. Each plant was now part of a vast biological weapons program, all perfectly legal since they were just farming. "The latest batch is ready," said Dr. James, the station's botanist turned weapons developer. He held up a sealed container of processed plant extract. Who would have thought tomato leaves could be so useful in war? Their conversation was interrupted by the facility's eye. Warning: Apex fleet detected. Estimated 50 ships approaching Mars orbit. Emma smiled. Since their victory at the moon, every human facility had been preparing for the Apex's revenge. The aliens had finally learned to fear human ingenuity, but they still didn't understand its full scope. "All stations, battle positions," she ordered through the comm system. "Remember, they're expecting our old tricks. Show them our new ones." The Apex fleet appeared in the red Martian sky, their ships now covered in modified armor and new shield systems. They had clearly adapted to fight against mining lasers and industrial chemicals. But humans had been busy adapting too. "Launch Operation Greenhouse," Emma commanded. Across the Martian surface, seemingly abandoned farming domes sprang to life. But instead of growing food, they now produced clouds of plant-based chemicals that could eat through the new Apex armor. Irrigation systems sprayed not water, but corrosive compounds derived from common plants. The Apex ships fired their weapons, expecting the humans to respond with modified mining equipment. Instead, they faced an entirely new kind of warfare. Solar panels turned reflectors concentrated sunlight into devastating heat rays. Wind turbines generated electromagnetic pulses that confused Apex targeting systems. "They're trying to adapt their shields," reported Bill from his station. "But they can't block everything. There are too many different types of attacks." He was right. The Apex had built defenses against industrial tools, but now faced agricultural weapons. Their new armor could resist mining lasers but melted under concentrated sunlight. Their improved shields blocked chemical sprays, but couldn't stop naturally occurring toxins. In orbit, more surprises waited. Space stations had turned their waste recycling systems into plasma generators. Communication arrays now fired focused beams of radiation. Even the orbital mirrors used for lighting Mars colonies became space-based weapons, reflecting and concentrating solar energy. The Apex fleet found itself caught in a web of unconventional warfare. Every human facility had turned its peaceful equipment into unique weapons. There was no single defense against such diverse attacks, no way to shield against every repurposed tool. "Signal from Earth Command," called Tom from communications. "Similar attacks are succeeding across the solar system. Venus colonies are using pressure chambers as weapons. Mercury outposts have turned solar collectors into heat rays. Even the deep space stations are fighting back with modified life support systems." Emma watched as the mighty Apex fleet struggled against weapons they had never imagined possible. Their rigid military doctrine had no answer for an enemy that could turn literally anything into a weapon. "Send word to all stations," she ordered. "Keep innovating. Keep adapting. The Apex think they've learned our tricks, but they don't understand. Humans never run out of new ideas." As another Apex ship fell to what had once been farming equipment, Emma knew they were approaching the final battle. The aliens had finally learned to fear human ingenuity, but they still hadn't learned its most important lesson. There was no such thing as a harmless tool in human hands. Earth's largest manufacturing complex stretched across 50 square miles of what had once been desert. Now it was humanity's last stand, and its greatest trap. Chief Engineer Mark Wilson stood in the central control room, watching as the largest Apex fleet ever assembled appeared in orbit. "Final count is 300 ships," reported Lisa from her monitoring station, "including their supreme command vessel." Mark nodded, his calm expression hiding the tension he felt. Every human facility across the solar system had contributed to this moment, sending their best ideas and modifications. The manufacturing complex had spent weeks being transformed into one massive weapon system. The Apex Supreme Commander's transmission filled every screen. "Humanity, your resistance ends today. You have impressed us with your creative use of primitive tools. But now you face our entire fleet. Surrender, and we will be merciful." Mark pressed the broadcast button. This is Chief Engineer Wilson. We have a counteroffer. Leave our solar system, or learn why you should never corner a creative species. The response was immediate. The Apex fleet descended through the atmosphere in perfect formation, their ships now bristling with weapons designed to counter every human trick they'd encountered. They had learned from their defeats, adapted their technology, and brought overwhelming force. But humans had learned too. "Begin Operation Factory Floor," Mark ordered. The trap was sprung. The entire manufacturing complex came alive, but not as separate weapons. Every system, every machine, every piece of equipment had been connected into one massive weapon network. Assembly line conveyor belts launched missiles made from industrial waste. Paint sprayers released clouds of nanomaterial that ate through Apex shields. Quality control scanners became targeting systems. The Apex fleet fired back, their weapons far more advanced than anything humans had built. But they couldn't hit what they couldn't properly see. The facility's ventilation system, modified to release clouds of specialized particles, created false sensor readings everywhere. "Second phase," Mark commanded. The ground itself seemed to come alive. Underground storage tanks released rivers of reactive chemicals. Loading cranes transformed into massive electromagnetic pulse generators. Even the facility's waste heat was weaponized, creating thermal updrafts that disrupted Apex ship formations. In orbit, human ships watched and waited. Not military vessels. They had all been destroyed long ago. These were cargo ships, tankers, and space tugs, each modified in ways the Apex would never expect. The Supreme Commander's voice came again, now showing signs of stress. "What are you doing? These are manufacturing tools. They cannot defeat a war fleet." Mark smiled as he activated the facility's final modification. Every power plant, every generator, every electrical system had been linked together. The entire complex became one massive energy weapon, but not in a way the Apex could predict. Instead of firing energy beams, it created a cascading series of power fluctuations. Apex shields, designed to block steady energy attacks, couldn't adapt to the chaotic pattern. Their own power systems began to overload as they tried to compensate. "Now," Mark ordered, "all units, attack." The modified cargo ships struck from orbit, each using a different form of repurposed equipment. Space tugs fired gravitational tethers meant for moving asteroids. Cargo vessels released clouds of processed industrial diamonds, each particle moving at incredible speeds. The Apex fleet, caught between the chaos of the factory weapons below and the improvised attacks from above, began to break formation. Their perfect military discipline counted for nothing against weapons they couldn't predict or understand. The Supreme Commander's ship tried to rally its forces, but it was too late. The entire manufacturing complex had become a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Not because it was advanced, but because it was unpredictable. Primitive, creative, human. As the mighty Apex fleet retreated in disarray, their Supreme Command ship badly damaged by what had once been assembly line robots, Mark sent one final message. "Remember this day. Humans don't need advanced weapons. We can turn anything into a weapon. And that makes us the most dangerous species of all." The war ended that day. The Apex, finally understanding that they could never predict or counter human ingenuity, withdrew from Earth's solar system. They had learned the hard way that true power didn't lie in advanced technology, but in the creativity to use whatever tools you had in ways nobody could expect.